Hey guys, welcome to our episode 2 of Photons to Photos. My name is Jeff Ball. This is our weekly discussion show about all things astrophotography. I hope it's driven by you, the subscriber, the YouTube viewer, and you can pose questions and topics on a weekly basis. And anything you post this week, we'll try to get to next week. We have a jam-packed show today. Couple of ways you can do that. You can see down here, this is a way to submit questions and topics through the Streamelements link. You can also get there by going to my webpage. At earthandskyphoto.com. Let me find my mouse. There we go. earthandskyphoto.com. If you want to know more about me and my astrophotography, you can see everything here. Find out how old I am. You can infer that from looking at some of the dates on some of the photos. But you can find that link if you go to contact information, and you'll see Streamelements there. You click on that link and it'll take you right to this page. And for a small donation, we will consider your question and topic for next week's show. We have 5 topics on this week's show, and we really encourage all astrophotographers of all levels. So we can go from tripod, landscape, nightscape, all the way to narrowband imaging. I mostly have experience with field, backyard. I don't have remote telescope experience, but we can cover all of those bases, from DSLR mirrorless to modified DSLR mirrorless up to dedicated astro cameras. And so joining me this week is my friend and astrophotography colleague, Brent Maynard. And Brent's the IT director at Marshall University. And Brent has modified, I believe, up to 12 cameras. I believe all Canons. And welcome, Brent.
Hello, Jeff. Thanks for having me on your Photons to Photos episode 2.
Thank you so much. Brent is an incredible resource for me, and he's modified, oh gosh, I can't remember, maybe 4 to 5 cameras for me so far.
Yeah, I think the first one I did was the 450, the 450 XS or something. I can't remember what it was, so long ago. That was one of the first ones we did. And we did the T1, the T1I, the T2I, the T3I, the T5I. So we've done several.
Yeah. Hey, Brent, I'm just looking up to the
Canon RP.
Yeah, the RP is. We're going to get to that topic here in just a bit. Looking up the chat, we have Rob Adkins joining us, Brent. Hey, Rob, I know I forgot to turn my audio back on when I played the introduction. Rob. So, yeah, we hope to get under a dark sky with you again soon. And hello, DIY NASA. It's another West Virginia imager, and he's doing great work. I believe he's up north a little bit, maybe in the Parkersburg area. And so he's doing great work. So it's great to have you guys with us. If you got something you'd like for us to address, drop it in the chat. We might get to it today, but I got to tell you, we are chock full with 5 topics today. And Brent, I'm just going to go ahead and dive into topic number 1. So in astronomy, there has been in the recent years a conversation about exposure times, total exposure needed. We've kind of had that number in terms of total exposure but how do you break up those sub exposures? What should be your optimum sub exposure time? And in the most recent issue, the summer issue number 11, there is a conversation on exposure calculators. And Ron Brecher writes an excellent article in Amateur Astronomy in summer issue 111 and reviews these strategies to consider and some of the tools that are out there for calculating that exposure. So one of the things I wanted to show you is, first off, if you are not a subscriber to the Amateur Astronomy magazine, I have a link in the description, and I highly encourage you to check that out. Well-written articles by people just like us, to be quite honest, but many of them are very dedicated, and so I encourage you to check it out. I believe it's a quarterly publication. I get the digital format. You get 3 different resolution formats, and it works out fantastically. But this is the article that Ron wrote. It's a great title, Enough is Enough, where he gets into that conversation about how do you break up those subframes and calculate the right exposure time. And of course, there's so many things to consider for calculating total exposure and exposure subframes. And it's not all just about the math, but we want to make sure we're getting the right exposure for our conditions, for our camera, telescope combination, plus the sky conditions that we're imaging in. And that's what this tool does. It's in terms of the total exposure time. Now, I have Pixinsight, and Ron's article goes on to explain this Calculate Sky Limited Exposure tool that's within Pixinsight. I ran 3 total scenarios through this exposure calculator, and I want to share that video I prepared with you now. Okay, so let's take a look at how this script works from start to finish. This is a fit file, uncalibrated, and we're going to have to select a preview area. Now, the first thing I like to do is go ahead and apply the heaviest STF stretch here. Our goal is to find, if possible, an area that really is free of any stars or nebulosity. And as you can see, when you stretch an image 100% with that STF, there's a good spot. Let's go with that. But it can be somewhat challenging to find an area, especially the compositions that I like are really full of nebulosity. So let's do a new preview right here. Let's don't get that star. All right. I think it'll work with this small of a preview. So we're going to turn off the STF stretch. And now we're going to open up the script. It's under Instrumentation and Calculate Sky Limited Exposure. Now, they do have some default cameras listed here. Unfortunately, none of them are mine. But you can enter everything manually. And in this case, I shot with my ASI 294 MM Pro at the 2.3 pixel size. So that is an ADU bit of 12. And the gain, I believe, is going to be 1. And the read noise is 1.2. You can get this from, yes, okay. 1.2, and dark noise is 0.1. I wish you could save this from session to session. Maybe you can, but I'm not aware of how to do that. And I'm leaving these at default now. We'll say, okay, so we're going to collect 2 hours of data in seconds. I believe that's going to be somewhere around 7,000, 70-some hundred minutes. So let's tell the software here, this was a 5-minute exposure. and we have to select the preview, and we're going to leave that. We're going to leave those factors where they are, 0 pedestal and bending of 1, and let's see what they're telling us. So, and this was a Calhoun County Park, so this is a Bortle 3 sky. So they're telling me here that my minimum exposure should be at least 27 to 23 seconds, and I could go as long as 20 minutes. This is with the red filter on the ASIAir Pro 294 mm at the bin 1 2.3 micron pixel and a lower ADU bit, and also it has a lower full well capacity at that pixel size as well. But you can see, and this is a 5-minute exposure. So is this type of information critical to really determining your sub exposures? Probably not. You're probably doing a sub exposure that's fine. But I think it's interesting. It makes you look at some of the parameters to come into play. Okay, so let's look at a little bit different scenario. Let's say you have some narrowband filters and you're wanting to try to figure out really what's the minimum exposure I should use from my backyard. That's what I'm going to ask right here. This is the Hydrogen Alpha Satyr Nebula region, and let me do that full STF stretch on there, and you can see how noisy this sucker can get real fast. So let's go to 1:1. Let's go up here, and this looks like, again, a fairly free background image of just no nebulosity, no stars. We're just trying to capture the background as best as possible. And let's go to a new preview, and let's see if the script will work with this. So let's go back to the script. Okay, so here's what this is saying for this narrowband filter, that my minimum exposures are 1 minute, 1 minute 40 seconds, and I could go as long as 32 minutes and still have really, I guess, maximum data that I could pull out from some of the things on the chip. So that's my understanding of how this calculate sky limited exposure script works. Again, I'm at a 10-minute exposure, and we'll talk about some of the other things to consider on your exposure. So Brent, that's just a tool that's within Pixinsight. I think there's also a tool he mentions within, what was the other software? In Nina. Now, I've not used Nina. I know that Sean on YouTube does a lot with teaching and training on Nina. Now, Brent, for us, I'm going to pull up here a picture that I put together from the DSLR world, and I did a little bit of research on this in that it was 2003. What I'm showing, Brent, is a raw capture with the Canon RP that you modified for me of the Rho Fucus. This is on the William Optics. This is a 5-minute exposure. And like I said, in 2003, when digital just really first started coming on, we got into that conversation about exposed to the right, where you start breaking down the dynamic range of the chip and the f-stops, and how it was important to get the low end of the f-stops up above the noise of the chip. And what I'm showing here is a histogram of that Rho Fucus about in the middle of that raw capture for that night. And that's kind of our DSLR world as far as determining exposure, and it works out fantastically. I mean, there are some factors to consider. You could have a dynamic range nebula. We know the Orion and M31 Andromeda, where you could have to do a blended exposure to capture the entire dynamic range of that composition. And of course, you want to maintain good star color as well. So you need to factor that in. But I don't know, Brent, is that what you're going with, kind of the exposed to the right in your DSLR world?
Yeah, I try to get it to at least halfway in the histogram. And it's all balanced between how well my mount's tracking, the ISO that I'm trying to shoot at, and getting that histogram moved over to the right, especially for faint objects, or if I'm using like the duoband filter, the hydrogen alpha O3 filter. Sometimes you have to push the ISO up a little bit, try to get the exposure a little bit longer. So it's all kind of a balance between those particular settings, but try to get it halfway.
What ISO have you been comfortable with on your RP so far? Have you been able to really kind of experiment with the higher ISOs?
Yeah, it's one thing I've been really pleased with, even in the warmer weather, that I'm able to push it to 2000, 2500 ISO with hardly any noise. In the winter, I'm hoping to be able to push that up to 3200 and see how well that does. It's definitely less noisy than the T5i or the more consumer Canons that I've used in the past.
Can you remember the pixel sizes of those 350Ds, the APS-Cs? Did they vary much from the
like
300s up to the
the 300, which was like a 10 megapixel? They were fairly good size pixels, but they were noisy. They had a lot of amp glow on the sides,
right?
All kinds of different issues you had with that. And when the T1i came out, it was really that was one of the best ones. It's still a good camera, even though it's old now. It's the noise profile on that's very low, and the whole T1, T2, T3, all the T series are pretty good. The pixel size is around 5 or 6 microns, I believe, for that series, and I think it's about the same, maybe a little bit bigger for the RP. I'd have to look that up because it's a full frame, 25, 26 megapixel full frame. So the pixel size are pretty good size on the RP.
Well, I just ordered a 20 by 30 print of that Rho Ophiuchus, and I'm just tickled with how that image came out. This is, again, I believe 2 hours of total exposure on that William Optics Red Cat and the Canon RP that you modified for me. Now, Brent, you mentioned other things that we certainly have to consider here in Appalachia, and that is, how well is your mount tracking? How much time are you going to get to image? This is not Arizona. And we've literally had, I hate to complain, I know things have been bad out west, but we've just had a terrible, this is probably the worst summer that I can recall.
Yeah, it's been cloudy and wet, moist all summer long. We had a couple of nights here and there that were nice, especially when we were cooler. We actually had kind of a cool spell at the end of July into the beginning of August. Actually, one of the best nights we'd had for a long time, but it's just not been a good summer for imaging.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people looking forward to some autumn transition here, and hopefully, obviously, the wildfires out west moderating a bit. But there are so many factors to consider on your exposure time and your total exposure. Now, one thing I don't think I went over in that calculator is you can modify the total exposure time, and that will impact the sub-exposure time. So depending on how much total exposure time you want to get, that will also factor in. But the biggest factor I saw modify the total exposure time when you play around with those variables are the bits, the number of bits ADU. If I took it up to 14, that reduced the total exposure time needed, and it increased the exposure time needed, and when you lowered the bits, it reduced the exposure time needed. The one thing I did do one other scenario, and I didn't record it, but it was with the RASA F2 at Spruce Knob on the Andromeda Galaxy, and it was telling me with the MC 294 MC Pro, told me that my optimum exposure was 3 minutes, and I think I was using, or less than 3. I think it was right at 3 for my exposures up there, but I think it was like 2.5 minutes. So if you're imaging with f2 at a really dark sky with a camera with a profile similar to the MC Pro, you're talking about some pretty short exposure times at a nice dark sky. Again, this calculator is to help you get the noise level up above what your imaging condition noise levels are in your backyard or wherever you are imaging from. And I see Chris, or ECP, has joined us in the chat. Hello, ECP. Thanks so much for joining us. So that's topic one. Anything else, Brent, on exposure?
No, just it's always kind of a challenge sometimes, balancing, like I said, how long you can track or how well your mount's performing versus how long you can do the exposures. It's a nice thing, like you mentioned, if you can image at f2. I've got this nice Sigma Art 85 millimeter f1.4, so you can really keep your exposures a lot shorter and get a lot of data, a lot more exposures to work with as well.
Yes, that f2, that Sigma lens is amazing. So with that, let's go to topic two. The New River Gorge has been a special place for West Virginians for decades. It is now one of the newest national parks in America and a location to be visited by all seeking adventure. I visited the park last week on August 12th for some Milky Way and landscape photography. Let's take a look at that visit. So I want to just play you the video that I'll be releasing here soon of how things went that evening. So Brent, that was the evening, and a couple of things while we had the show here. I wanted to kind of debut that here with a little bit of color around the evening. And thank you, DIY NASA. Actually, just as a little behind the scenes, I'd been playing around with some video editing software. I had always used LumaFusion on the iPad. I played around with another video editing on the iMac. I think it was called Power Director, and it just wasn't rendering. So I bought Final Cut Pro. So that's my first Final Cut Pro option, and I love that software. But some of the things I wanted to comment on, Brent, is we tried a lot of pre-visualization. Brent and I were sharing some pre-visualizations. I know that road. I ride bikes, and that's one of our favorite bike routes, is down what's called a one-way road, Fayette Station. Goes all the way from the rim down to the river, and that's a 900-foot canyon. But you don't know with the foliage where are your openings going to be. So we used Google, and I kind of had an idea where I needed to be on what side of the river to get the right angle of the Milky Way. And so I did one loop. It's a one-way, so you got to go all the way down and back up to really scout out all the sites. And the site I ended up at is the Whitewater Raft pull out down just north of the New River Gorge Bridge. And you get there and you're all set up, and it's a national park. It's really dark in the gorge. But there is a town called Fayetteville that's right on the edge of the gorge. So I like the image from a couple of number of reasons. First off, it shows how dark. I wanted to maintain that darkness down at the river level. It's dark down in the gorge. The rock is fairly bright, and there's a little bit of light that comes up off of the rock on the banks, but that's it. And I hope that the national park engages in some conversations with the local towns about trying to modify the light, trying to get a little bit more control on the light situation there. I know that's very challenging, and I don't want an overreaching government situation, but I think when you see that and you realize that the resource that the dark sky can be right there in a new national park, I just wanted to present that image for that. Now that image technically is a 5-image horizontal stack, and Lightroom does a beautiful job of stacking even a night image with stars. With a different, that's a 20 mil. I like stacking that 20 mil vertically because it puts the worst of the aberrations of the lens are over to the edges. So now you can crop that out if you want, or you're putting the worst aberrations in the landscape, and you're keeping pretty nice stars all the way vertically. So when I got there, my original composition of the 20, there wasn't going to be any darkness to be captured with the bridge. It was all light. So I had to really climb high up into the sky to get to the river of stars. So that's why I had to go with a 5-frame vertical stitch. And I hope you like it. That's an experiment. It's an area that I want to visit a lot more for photography, Brent. I know you've been there and you're pretty familiar with it as well.
Yeah, it's a nice place. There's lots of places I like to hike out to, but hiking back in the middle of the night would be kind of challenging. There's some really good vistas out along the rim.
Well, I have a Star Trail photo from down there at the Fayette Bridge that is going to happen whenever we get that really cooperative window. I think that will really work nicely. I'm not sure how synced up the bridge is with straight north, but I think it still works out compositionally pretty well down there. And you're welcome to join me. It is a little spooky down there.
Yeah, I was hoping to try to make it this last time, but
it was a whirlwind trip, and I'm glad I went because now I really have a feel for the lay of the land out there. But again, if you're just joining us, welcome to the show. This is Photons to Photos, episode 2. And my name is Jeff. This is Brent joining me as my guest this evening. If you are wanting to pose a question for next week's show, you can do that simply by going to the description in this show, and there's a link to Streamelements, and that's where you're going to have the option to make a donation with a tip or a question for next week's show. So I encourage you to check that out, and you can get on next week's show. So Brent, that's going to do it for topic number 2. Let's look at topic number 3. There are many dedicated astro imagers across the various subspecialties of astrophotography. There are few who rival the dedication of planetary specialist Christopher Go. Christopher recently posted an amazing set of images from Jupiter, a very rare event, a triple conjunction. Let's take a look at his images. Let me get the website up here, and then I'll get you back to the screen. There we go. So if you have, let's just do a screen capture. If you have not been to Christopher's site, well, let me resize that here so you can really get a good look. And I've got a video to show you that was fantastic. So if you've not been to Christopher's website, I have a link in the description. I also have a link to the Amateur Astronomy magazine I referenced, and a link to the National Park Service for the New River Gorge National Park and Preserve. But this is the image. Now, Christopher is in the Philippines, and I'm very fortunate because he uses an astrophysics mount, so he posts all of his work to our astrophysics users group. So we kind of get first look on when he posts something. And this was on the 15th of August in the Philippines, a triple conjunction. I believe this is Europa, Callisto, and Ganymede is over here. Now, Christopher, again, I have a link to his webpage, and he has produced, I don't even know how many years it goes. I believe he uses a C14 on the astrophysics mount, and he does this, he used to do it from his balcony in the Philippines. So those of you who are trying planetary imaging, and I know Brent does a lot with planetary, you appreciate that being on an island in the middle of the Pacific, what it can do to help make your planetary images look like this. Now, Chris is an expert here. He's a world-renowned top of the world Jupiter imager. And so this is that rare triple conjunction. Now, what I wanted to show you is he posted a video that shows this in motion. And there, hopefully you're seeing that. I've got it on a loop. And I don't know how this, Brent, do you know about how long that might be representing there in time?
For the transit,
You're probably are you seeing the video now?
Not yet, but about an hour or two, about an hour or two, no, about a couple hours, depending on, some of the moons go faster because they're a little closer, and other ones they're farther out, take a little bit longer to transit. But the transits usually are a couple hours, maybe 3 hours at the most, from limb to limb.
And that's about what he has here. You've got Io that's going behind Jupiter on the right. I actually have this notated. I went into Sky Safari and have a file here. Let me show you this in motion. I slow it down. Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. And this is Io over here going behind Jupiter's limb. And now I've got it down minute by minute here. I've really slowed it down so you can see maybe almost real or second by second, I'm sorry, how slow this process can be. But it was an amazing event. When Chris tells you that it's a rare event, it's a rare event. Nobody knows Jupiter better than Christopher Go. And he was ecstatic. He said these were perfect conditions for him. He was able to capture everything exactly the way he wanted to. And again, I don't mean to set unreal expectations for those of you who have may have never looked through a telescope at Jupiter, but because you will likely not see this unless you are somewhere like the Florida Keys or have somewhere that has really high quality seeing. But that's an amazing video that Chris has posted. Brent, I know you do wonderful work here, given that we are not in the middle of a Pacific island.
Yeah, the biggest issue we have is the jet stream is always overhead. Typically, we rarely have a stable air mass all the way up. Plus, we are, for the past several years, at conjunction or opposition. I mean, at opposition, Jupiter and Saturn both are just so low in the sky for us right now. Whereas down in the Philippines, it's probably pretty close to overhead.
It was when I loaded it in Sky Safari. It was pretty high up. Yep.
So he has a lot less atmosphere to go through.
Yep.
Stable air, and I think it's just impressive with a 14-inch that he's able to capture the albedo on the moons. That's amazing.
He's been at this a long time. I don't know how long. I would say at least 10 years he's been imaging.
Oh, yeah,
I can't
way back. It's probably closer to 20 because my first images that I took of Jupiter with a webcam were back in like 2001, and I started seeing him back then. So it's been probably close to 20 years that he's been doing this.
I don't think there's anyone who has imaged Jupiter in the world more than him. Very impressive. So that's topic number, was that 3? That was topic number 3. And definitely check out Chris's page. Let's look at topic number 4. There are many ways to achieve digital enhancement objectives in astrophotography. One objective, star reduction, is no exception to this. Adam Block has recently shared a new technique in Pixinsight that required hands-on management of the process. That technique has now been made into a script by Maxim Valenko. And when I say into a script, that's for Pixinsight. So I put together a video that goes over the utilization of this, and let me show you that. M16 that I captured back at Calhoun County Park back in June. And I had tried some of my star reduction techniques and really wasn't coming up with the result that I was looking for. So I applied Adam's techniques that he described in his YouTube video about 2 months ago manually using Pixinsight. And I came up with an image that I really liked, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But what I have loaded here are the images that are required to utilize the script in Pixinsight. And I really encourage you to go to Adam's website, watch 2 videos. The video where he goes over how to manually do this within Pixinsight, and his latest video where he shows you how to use the script, the newly constructed script within Pixinsight to achieve this. So I'm not going to go into the details. Adam is a world-class instructor and image enhancer. So I don't need to go over this. That information is on his YouTube channel. If you're not already subscribed, I highly encourage you to do so. And I have his YouTube linked in the descriptions of this broadcast. So what I have loaded is the M16 original image that I had stretched a little bit Maybe it's not at full image stretch here, but it's pretty far along in the stretch. So that is called the original image. Then there is a starless image. You just use StarNet to construct that image, and then the script does everything else. This is where you load the original. This is where you load the starless. And those are the only two images that you really need to load. You do have to understand what this structure, what the binarization, this closing box does, the dilation and the convolution. And Adam describes all of that beautifully in his video. All I wanted to show you here, and what I really like about the script version of this, is it's almost like utilizing Photoshop in a way. Now I have it zoomed in. When you zoom in, it really is less taxing on the processing power of the computer. So the process preview really happens quite quickly when you have a zoomed in area on the main image. But let me show you. Here's the original. Here's the starless. Here's the luminance image. This is the structure, the binarized, the closing, the dilated, the convoluted, the halo mask, and then there's the result. So let me go from the result to the original. There's the original, and there's the result. What's beautiful is you can see all of these across the various iterations of the process and see how the final result looks, and then also play around with the aggressiveness and some of the other factors that you might want to see how it impacts the final result. There's a little bit more aggressive with a lower convolution, and you can see how it impacts the final image. So please see Adam's YouTube where he goes over in detail the manual and the script application of this star reduction technique, which I really like and plan on using as a core part of my image processing. So I wanted to show you the final result of just taking that one M16 image that was slightly stretched. This wasn't all the way to completion, and showing you the star reduction technique as it was applied through the script. This is the after, and this is before. After and before. Let me zoom in. There are a few artifacts on some stars that I probably would have corrected through the preview if I had taken a little bit more time with this. But this is the after, and this is before. After, before. So that's still not bad, but I probably would have tweaked it a little bit. I think we could have got it real nice and clean. And this isn't the final image. Let me show you the final image. This is the final image that you'll find on the website, and I was really happy with how this came out. I overlaid the stars at a little bit earlier process than when I stretch. I don't stretch the image with the stars. I stretch the StarNet image and then try to layer the stars back in. So Brent, I don't mean to make this a Pixinsight heavy show tonight, but these are just two things that popped up, and I don't want to really overwhelm anybody because I have two books that deal with Pixinsight. Yes, it's a little complicated, but I got to tell you, that script, and Adam Block, again, go to his, I have it linked in the description. He does a great job on the tutorial, and it's a very subtle, but it doesn't really impinge on the stars. It maintains the integrity of their structures, and it provides just a subtle reduction in that star field that I think makes a big impact on the overall image. And you don't get many scripts that you can see the, like in Photoshop, layers where you can kind of adjust to taste almost real time. You don't get that with a lot of scripts or a lot of processes in Pixinsight. That's why, as a Photoshop legacy person, I sometimes just revert to my Photoshop techniques because I find I can really salt it to my own taste. But that's a great script. It's well described by Adam, and it's a good technique. I had kind of developed my own star reduction technique based on Rogelio Bernal's recommendation in his book, and nothing there. I always give credit where I learned the technique. There's nothing new here I'm coming up with. I hope I'm just kind of mixing the ingredients a little differently to match my own artistic flavor. Speaking of that, Chris, or ACP, I know, asked, do you sell your prints? So let me just show you real quick. Now that New River Gorge I put together as a poster. I thought it kind of made a nice poster option. And so I now have a new section. I'm kind of orienting around poster construction. When you go to my website, you kind of have to click to really see how the full poster would be presented, or the image would be presented. So this is the poster, New River Gorge National Park and Preserve. It's in Glen Jean, West Virginia, River Stars. I think I have this for $30. And I'm expecting my first shipment to come in here soon. Then I have fine art photography, fine art astrophotography. Here, again, make sure you click all the way through to the print, to the image, so you can see what it looked like. And then I have some examples of what the print would look like up on the wall. And I'm hoping to get this print for my office wall here within the next few days. So yes, thank you for checking all that out. And those are satin prints on metal. They look fantastic. They aren't reflective like glass. You know, Brent, I get these ads on Facebook about printing on metal prints, and they show this gloss, and it's hilarious because they can only show a split second of somebody positioning the print because it's basically a mirror, and it's so distracting. So I like the satin finish. But Brent, that's a star reduction technique. I don't know, and I don't even mention Noel, I believe it's Noel Carboni's Astro Tools in Photoshop. We aren't even getting into that, but maybe you've had experience with that, Brent. Oop, I've lost your audio, Brent. I'm not sure if you muted on your end.
Sorry about that. I muted.
Okay.
Yeah, I use the Noel Carboni Photoshop actions for star reduction. Sometimes it gets a little too aggressive and causes some crazy looking artifacts.
Yeah, I agree.
The other thing that I do, which seems to work well, is I just use the Photoshop. I just go around, select all the stars, and do a minimum filter on it, and kind of play with how aggressive I want to get with that, and feathering the selection area, and that actually does a pretty good job of minimizing the stars as well.
Yes. Yep, that's all fantastic. I know there's more than one way to skin a cat. So Brent, let's get to our oops.
I was going to say I've not put my big toe in the Pixinsight waters yet, but one of these days I will.
I'm getting more comfortable with it, but I got to tell you, I'm probably 2 years in now. Something, if you haven't picked up in my other videos, I have a very strong bias to not spending hours of process enhancement. I don't mind spending a little time to get it where I want it, but I do not want to just sit here and slave over hours and hours and hours of a process. So I have found some processes in Pixinsight to be excellent. Of course, it's great for image calibration. They have a WB weighted batch pre-processing script, and it does a beautiful job of dark frame, flat frame calibration and alignment, and then coming up with a master light frame. So beautiful process. There are some other things I like in Pixinsight, but I still revert to Photoshop a lot. And I got to tell you, I am pretty light on enhancing. The older I get, I want it to look like a photograph. I don't want it to look like something different.
Yeah.
DIY NASA says he's had some luck with dust and scratches for minor star reduction. That's another good option, I think, in Photoshop. I thank you for that input, DIY NASA. Brent, let's get to topic 5. Many
Okay.
astro imagers use DSLRs as either their main imaging device or as a supplement to other cameras. There are many tools available to control the DSLR, and the options are expanding. The ASIAir is adding another critical DSLR to the list of controllable cameras. And we are so fortunate to have Brent with us, because Brent not only is an amazing imager and a do-it-yourselfer, a maker, a camera modifier, but Brent also is a beta tester for ASIAir. And he's got the latest. Is that thing up and running?
Yeah, it's running. Do you want me to
Yeah, if you're ready.
show
Oh,
it?
I probably have to tell my screen. Do I have to do that? Hold on here.
Yeah, can make it my
Let me try to send you the
QuickTime
prompt.
running here.
There you go. Hopefully you got it. Yeah, Brent's a beta tester for the ASIAir app, and I think it's pretty exciting what's happening.
So let me go ahead and share. You need to enable the sharing in Zoom.
Well, let me see here. Oh, I know what I need to do. There we go. Hopefully you're getting a prompt now.
Yes. Okay, so
Let me go to full screen here, Brent.
should be able to see it coming across now. So this is my iPhone sharing, and this is an image that I just took a few minutes ago with the ASIair. The camera is a Canon RP, which is nice to have that now. It shows up in the software as a Canon EOS R2. And this is exciting for me because the RP does not have a built-in intervalometer for bulb mode. And being able to control the camera fully with the ASIair, as well as all the ISO settings, saving to the camera, saving to the ASIair, the images, also being able to do plate solving with this tool is amazing. Doing polar alignment. So now I can do this all with my primary imaging camera now, which is currently the RP. So with the latest beta version, it's working quite well. So I'm just taking another quick image here. You can see that it's loading. It should load up here pretty quickly. It's a fairly good size image, so it takes it a few seconds. With the older ASIair, which I'm running, which is just the slower 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi band instead of the 5G band that the new ASIair uses. So you can see the image updated, and it's just I just have the camera down here on the floor taking a picture of whatever's in front of it. But having this capability is going to be very nice. I can't wait to have some nice dark clear skies to get this out again. Some other information you can see, it shows what the camera temperature is down towards the bottom, the battery levels. It's set to auto ISO, but I can have full control over that as well. I can go into the camera settings and set to whatever ISO I want. So let's just set it to ISO 500. And if I take an image, another image, it should be a little bit different in exposure. I'm not sure what the ISO was on that last image, but you also see what the image size is. This is 20, I think it's like a 26 megapixel camera. So it shows 6,000 by 4,000 or so. So it's a great little tool for being out in the field. It runs all night on a battery pack, one of the lithium-ion battery packs, and it's really changed the whole image capture process by having something like the ASIAir devices, either using ASI cameras from ZWO, or they've added the Canon RP. They've also added some. Let me pull it up here. They've added some additional cameras. They've added the Nikon D780, the Z6 II, and the Z7 II as part of this latest beta. And there's the Canon RP. So having these cameras available now, mirrorless cameras, as part of the software is going to be a great new feature.
Hey, Brent, can you go back into the ASIAir? I'm curious, what does that bin? Can you change?
Yeah, I don't know if this actually changes on this type of camera.
Yeah.
I can change it to bin. Let me just change it to bin 4. I don't think it's going to actually do anything, since this is not a dedicated astro camera that does.
Yeah, I can't believe that there's. I mean, they can only do what Canon has written in the firmware.
Well,
right?
they actually did bin it. If you look down the lower left hand corner, you can see what the image resolution is. So that's a 4x bin. So it actually did bin the image. So I don't know what they're doing. They must be just doing pixel, combining,
right?
In the ASIAir.
Okay.
So that's interesting.
Well, that might be very handy if you're imaging, like you said, maybe with a light pollution filter, and you're going after a dimmer object, and you really want to try to verify the centering. Now, those days have almost passed us with plate solving, but sometimes you like to get a visual reaffirmation that you have the actual nebulosity on the chip.
Now, that was a bin 2. That's interesting. It really made that red when I set that to bin 2. I'm going to play with this. This is bin 3. I have to read up and see what these binnings are doing for these one-shot color cameras.
Yeah.
How it's doing the pixel combining.
Right. And we know that there's some kind of a mono button that they're doing, and they're doing some interpolation for a mono grab. Might be beneficial, especially if you want to use a narrow band. I don't know. These are things we're finding out. Now, this is a beta. And how long do you say it goes from beta to full release?
It's usually they're well into the beta. I think now this is like the 7th beta release on this version 1.7. So I'm hoping within the next few weeks or so they'll have it out in the app stores for download to update your regular firmware and app on your smart device.
It's an amazing app. It works on either your iPhone or your iPad. We use it regularly with our ASIAir cameras, ZWO cameras, but now I'm very excited. They just added the Canon RA as well, so I'm very excited to try these cameras. Thank you, Brent, for demonstrating that beta release. Yeah. And, one thing I wanted to do is just kind of end with a conversation. We had a fella from our Northern Virginia Astronomy group, Jonathan. He was asking about whether to get a DSLR, mirrorless camera, APS-C, full frame. And what's interesting is he has some really nice telescopes. He's got a Takahashi 100DZ with an FC35 reducer and a Takahashi TOA 130 with a TOA 35 reducer. And he says that the image circle is 44 millimeters with both. Now, he wants to keep the cost below $1,400. And he is leaning toward Canon, but would consider a Nikon, and he might use it with a C11 Edge that he has. So he goes into some of the options that he's been considering. But Brent and I think we're in agreement on this right now with the current state of things and our experience with that Canon RP, that it's very hard not to go Canon. It's very hard not to go Canon RP. Now, I don't know if he has a legacy of other lenses. If he has a legacy of Nikon lenses, then that changes the conversation. But with the scopes he's
Well, I don't know. I
mentioned.
mean, my some of my best
That's
lenses other
true.
than the Sigma are Nikon. I use a
That's true.
Nikon 180, a 105.
Yeah,
They
that
fit
180
just
is
fine on
awesome.
the camera.
Yes, you can get adapters. Can you get adapters for the new mount?
Oh yeah. So what I well yeah I just use the standard
Oh, you have to double
EOS
adapter
adapter.
it.
Well, no, I just put the little ring adapter on the lens, the Canon ring adapter, and it just hooks onto the camera just as though it's a Canon lens.
Okay.
I just leave
Okay.
the ring adapters on the camera on the lenses.
Okay.
They're just always on the lenses. The other thing I didn't mention, out of all the cameras that I have modified, the easiest camera by far that I've modified is the Canon RP. I think it's just the newer technology, a lot less chips, a lot less cables inside the camera, so it's easy to take apart. It's fairly easy to get the filter out that we're looking for, and then put it back together.
And there are videos, step-by-step videos out there to walk you through the whole process.
Yeah, and there's also services. There's companies that if you don't want to do that, you can send your camera off and they'll modify it for you.
Yeah, we were looking at one thing I saw in the inventory. Now, I think that the pressure on the supply chain has maybe moved pricing against the end user like us, because I know Brent got a great deal on an RP a few months back. But the latest I saw was there's a $900 refurbished RP on the Canon website. And how much would you pay for a modification, do you think, Brent?
I think I've seen them depending on the modification type. About if you're putting any glass back in, they'll add a little bit to it. But it's anywhere from like 250 to $300, maybe 350, depending on if you're adding additional filters back into the camera. Or the cheapest is just doing a full spectrum mod, and it's up to you to put either clip-in filters or some other type of filter in your image train. Otherwise, you're going to get bloating in the UV and you're going to get bloating in the IR because these cameras are very sensitive into the UV and the IR. But people really like the full spectrum if they want to experiment with pure IR photography or UV photography, as well as doing astrophotography with the appropriate filters.
Yeah, I think Jonathan mentions this Life Pixel website. It looks like they do have an Astro mod, but it looks like they are more oriented toward an IR mod.
Yeah, there's a lot of IR mods out there, and all they're doing is just taking out both filters and making it a full spectrum, and maybe putting if they're making a dedicated IR camera, then they've just put an IR pass filter in there to, and cut everything below that.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that's a $900 full frame for $900 for a full frame Canon RP plus your 300, 350 for a modification. For $1,300, you're going to have a full Astro ready full frame camera that's going to work beautifully with those telescopes and that image circle that they produce, and a camera that you can use for other things. I'm broadcasting right now. I think the battery's still on. There we go. That's my Canon RA right there. And you can adjust that color to where you want for the most part. I mean, if you're going to be a professional portrait photographer, you probably don't want to use an Astro modified camera. But for our uses, primarily Astro, but you could use that full frame camera for nightscapes, landscapes, multiple video grabs. I don't think there's a better value out there. I've used.
Yeah, I use it for planetary. My latest Jupiter and Saturn images were done with the RP, just capturing video. And plus the other thing that's good about there's a website. I have to find the link. I'll give it to you if I can find it again. It goes through all the Canon cameras and their quantum efficiency and how, basically what the well depth is. And the RP is one of the highest. So it's actually one of the better cameras from the Canon, at least, for doing deep sky long exposure imaging.
Yeah, I'd love to have that resource, Brent. You've mentioned that to me, and I think that sounds like a great resource to share with our community. And I'm going to let Brent go for the evening. I know he's had a long day. He's helping his son refurbish a house, and he has been sanding multiple bedrooms and floors. He's a professional sander.
Fun jobs.
Brent, thank you so much. I'm going to say
thank you, Jeff.
Goodbye to you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for lending your expertise. I appreciate you as always. We'll get together for lunch.
Okay, talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you all for joining us in the chat room and online. We really appreciate you joining us. We're trying to put together a weekly show of topics, and I would love for you to suggest the topic or the question. You can do that by visiting Streamelements Jeff Ball Astrophotography /tip. That's a great way to get your topic or question featured on the show next week. As you can see, we put a lot of time and effort into developing the show content from week to week. So we hope this experiment works out in the format. I hope I get a little bit better with the technology side of things, and don't forget to turn the mics on. But I thank you all for joining us. I'm going to check the chat one last time. Hi, DIY NASA. Have purchased a 60D modified, but can't get infinity focus at f2. What's most effective to add glass back to gain focus? There may be a filter. Well, there might be an in-camera filter. I'm not sure if Astronomic or Botter, who make the in-camera body filters, have you tried any in-camera body filter, even a light pollution filter, to see if you can get that focus at f2? Those might be helpful. I know Brent has had a little bit of a challenge with one of his lenses. I hate that I said goodbye to him before I checked the chat. I'll tell you what, DIY NASA, let me run this by Brent. Maybe we can get to that next week as a potential follow-up question on our show, okay? I'll do a little bit more research on that. But my first guess would be to look at some of the in-camera body filters. I know Astronomic makes, I think, the STC. Oh, there's Brent. Okay, he's providing that link for the well depth, I believe, and the quantum efficiencies for the Canon cameras. Thank you, Brent. Let's do a little bit of research on this, DIY NASA. Okay, thanks so much for the question. Hey, thank you all very much for joining us. We had a more engaging session this week. I hope we just kind of build momentum, and I hope it's something that you get a value out of. And until next week, clear skies and take care. Thanks for joining us.